All right, today we're going to tackle something huge. We're going to challenge a core rule of logic that most of us just take for granted and explore a pretty revolutionary idea that completely redefines what it means for an argument to be rational.
So let's just jump right in with a really basic question. For pretty much all of history, the answer to this was a simple and very loud yes.
But what if that wasn't the whole story? We're about to see how modern logic took this system-breaking error and actually turned it into an incredibly powerful and practical tool.
Okay, so before we can really get the genius of the revolution, we've got to understand the old way of thinking. Let's look at why contradictions were seen as, the absolute end of the line for any argument.
Yeah, for centuries, if you found a contradiction in an argument, it wasn't just a small problem. It was considered the ultimate intellectual sin. Basically, game over for your entire theory. Done.
And this wasn't, just a suggestion or a best practice. It was an absolute ironclad rule. For any logical system to even be considered valid, it had to be perfectly consistent. So why? Why was everyone so terrified of a single contradiction?
Well, the reason for this deep-seated fear, it all comes down to this one single, incredibly powerful and, frankly, destructive rule that's baked right into classical logic.
Okay, let's really get into this. It's called the principle of explosion, and believe me, that name is perfect. The Latin ex falso sequitur quod libet literally translates to from falsehood, anything follows, and that's exactly what it does.
All right, let's actually walk through how this thing works, how this logical bomb goes off. It's kind of wild. First, you just assume a contradiction is true. Let's say the sky is blue and the sky is not blue are both true. Okay, from there, logic lets you just focus on one part. So let's pick the sky is blue. Now, here's where it gets sneaky. You can add literally any other statement to it with the word or. So now we can say the sky is blue or unicorns exist. And logically, that's a valid move. But, and this is the key, you still have the other half of your original contradiction just sitting there. The sky is not blue, so you use that to attack your new sentence. If the sky is not blue, then that first part is false, which leaves only the second part standing. And boom! Just like that, unicorns exist is now proven. Since we could have put anything there, we've just created a key that proves everything. So this whole process has a name: trivialization. And it's a huge deal. It means that one tiny little contradiction doesn't just, weaken your theory. No, it completely detonates it. It brings the whole house down, making it totally meaningless. Because if you can prove everything, well, you've really proven nothing at all. So you have this catastrophic problem, right? And for a long time, everyone just accepted it. But then, in the 20th century, a group of logicians came along and started asking a really radical question. They asked, what if the problem isn't the contradiction itself? What if the real problem is that demolition charge we built into the system, the principle of explosion, and that one question, right there, kicked off a revolution in logic?
And this is what led to a brand new kind of logic. You can see it right here. It's defined by just rejecting that one explosive rule. The core principle totally shifts. The goal isn't to get rid of contradictions entirely, which can be impossible sometimes. The new goal is just to contain them, to stop them from wrecking everything. This new family of logic is called Paraconsistent logic. And you can really think of it like building a firewall or maybe a containment field around a contradiction. The inconsistency is still there, sure, but it's walled off, it's localized. It stops that explosion before it can ever get started, and that lets the rest of the system keep on working just fine. Okay, so this is all great for philosophers, but why should you or I care? Well, because this finally gives logic the tools it needs to deal with the real world, which, let's face it, is messy. I mean, think about it. Paraconsistent logic is perfect for fields where you just have to deal with inconsistencies. Take an early scientific model, right? Like early ideas about the atom. They were super useful, even though we knew they had flaws. Or think about a giant company database. What if one entry says a customer lives in New York and another says they live in LA? With classical logic, that one error technically makes the entire database logically useless. But with paraconsistent logic, it's just a database with a small, localized problem that we can work around and eventually fix. And the impact here was huge. This revolution didn't just add a new tool to the toolbox. It fundamentally changed how we see the whole landscape of logic itself.
This new way of thinking really clicked with other massive discoveries happening at the time. I'm talking about things like Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Gödel had already shown that the old-school demand for perfect, airtight consistency has its own serious limitations. He proved that any consistent system has to be incomplete, meaning there are true things it just can't prove.
So what you're seeing is this massive philosophical shift, a move away from the idea that there's one single, perfect, black-and-white logic that has to govern everything we do.
So instead of having just one hammer that you're forced to use for every single job, we now have a full toolkit. We've realized that different problems need different logical tools. Classical logic, it's still absolutely perfect for something clean like mathematics. But paraconsistent logic, it's way better for modeling messy things like human beliefs or managing real-world data.
And that leaves us with one last, really big question to chew on. If logic, the very set of rules we use to figure out what's true, isn't one single thing, but a whole toolkit, if we can pick and choose the rules based on the problem we're trying to solve, then what does that mean for the idea of absolute truth itself?